Here we are.
Yes, indeed.
What do we know? What don't we
I
know?
didn't know whether it's not an assigned seat.
I think. Oh, there I am. I'm in the, yes, you're here. You're here.
I mean, if you want to run the budget committee.
Not this week.
Space? I'm sorry, Ralph.
That's okay. I just can't read. Somebody just said, hey,
Well, I invited him to sit there, so that was.
thanks for covering me. Really,
Well, it was true.
Andy belongs there. I'm an interloper.
I need those.
Ah, that feels much better.
Good. Yeah, that one isn't wired.
Well, at least not in the seat.
Eric, do you know if anyone else is coming from budget?
Ellen is gonna be on Zoom.
Okay,
She's probably on this. And,
she is not, but she might be coming.
Save the airwaves, huh?
Bill, are you ready?
We're rolling.
Oh, we're rolling. Well, then I guess we might as well go ahead and start. Good evening. It is 6:31 in Reedfield, Maine, and I'll call this meeting to order. Do it all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we're here for a public budget meeting and hearings. The purpose of this meeting is to go over the budget and also to discuss two community projects that are involved in this year's town meeting warrant. And we have this meeting scheduled to end at 8:30, so we're going to try and keep things moving along to meet that goal. And I will turn it over to Eric.
So I'm just gonna do a screen share. Here. Go through the packets available. One of the room that we came in, and counting the same number of additional documents as well. Specifically for that project, we also had some maps and things related to the
Something else.
There, just outside the door.
I'll get it for you.
I will put this slideshow down. All right, how's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's almost that. It's on screen up there, would show my screen share, or is it, it's not showing the PowerPoint?
Yes. Okay,
That might just be,
I think I gotta change the view.
okay.
Thank you so much.
Are we having a technical difficulty?
Yeah, for some reason, when I go full screen for the PowerPoint, it doesn't show on the share screen. It's showing the basic slides, not the actual.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, but that could be on Zoom.
Aha.
Can you make it full, is it full screen on your machine, Eric?
There you
There we go.
There we go.
All right, that's, good. Okay, very good. Thanks, Bill. So, this is in person and by Zoom. And, we have the technology to, happen at the moment. If you're here, you don't need this information, so thanks everybody for showing up. Meeting agenda, a lot of introduction, followed by project highlights, including broadband internet project, the Fairgrounds Community Park Conservation Project. We will review budget and meeting goals, and we will be having a presentation discussion, a summary budget information. So I will turn it over to Catherine, who's the acting chair of the select board, to introduce the membership.
Thank you. I'm the vice chair, but Dennis Price is absent tonight, excused. And with me is Ralph Eno, representing the select board.
Okay. So moving on, we have the budget committee. I'll ask Andy Holman to introduce himself and the committee.
Hi, I'm Andy Tolman. I'm happen to be chair of the budget committee. Ellen Schneider is on Zoom, although you can't see her at the moment. And Marty Hanisch and Ed Sims are both here. We're ready to go.
Excellent. So I will ask Catherine to go through the budget summary process today.
Sure. So we have held regular meetings throughout the early winter or the late winter and early spring. There have been 11 meetings and presentations. Some of those have been with the budget committee and select board together. Others have been just the budget or just the select board. We've had review and comment by members of the public from boards and committees and commissions, the budget committee and the select board. I believe all of those are on tape, so if you want to watch them, you can look on our YouTube library. All the department and division details have been reviewed in detail by the budget committee, not by the select board, because we're very supportive of the work that the budget committee does and trust their good work. We do review it. We met a couple weeks ago and reviewed and revised the 5-year capital plan, and at that time we had a fairly lengthy discussion of the, I need to get the name right, the ball field project, fairgrounds,
Community Park and Conservation Project.
Community Park and Conservation Project. So our public budget meeting goals are to discuss and highlight the key projects. We'll do those first with broadband, as Eric said earlier, and then with the Community Park and Conservation Project. Then we'll move on to the budget summary. And then we'll have questions and concerns. However, we did decide that we would take some questions and concerns after each of the 2 first presentations. So if folks have any questions about those 2 specific projects. And then we will give you some information on the town meeting and secret ballot vote.
All right, so Andy, you want to look at some of our long-term budget goals?
So, well, I can do that, just so I get to say something tonight. So we have been working for several years now to try to improve communication with the public and get more public feedback in the budget. I can't say we've been dramatically successful, but we are working on it, and we appreciate the people who do give us feedback. Whether it's what we want to hear or not, it's good that we hear it. We work on the town budget. That's what we have control over. We take into account what we think the school and county budgets will be and try to balance our needs with theirs, but we know that we don't control them at this table. We are also trying to work through capital investment projects in a way that minimizes their impact and as it levels out the requirements for tax money. And we also try to use our designated and undesignated funds responsibly. And the whole point of this is we're working towards a greater public good.
You want to go with the specific budget goal for this year?
Sure. We or this year, we are working in recreational assets and public facilities as our major expenditure goals. At the same time, we're trying to provide reliable public services, including communication, emergency services, and transportation. And we are trying to, as best we can, minimize the impact of the budget on the taxpayers.
So that brings us to our first project highlight, and that's the community broadband project. And the goal here, and it's been consistent for a few years now, is to provide uniform, affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband internet to everyone in town. So there's a lot of focus on consistency, equity, and doing better than what we've seen in the town so far. This has been a priority for 3 or 4 years. We've been working very actively in the last year or so, but the town has been working with the broadband committee, we've been working with Western Kennebec Lakes Broadband Association on interlocal effort. And so this really has been a building process. And I want to thank the select board for their work, including a very helpful 2020 resolution on implementation that really helped set the direction and framework for us to proceed with this important project. In November of 2021, voters approved municipal borrowing and RFP process, which is request for proposals, and contract negotiations. So we have moved forward with all of those components. And I do want to thank the Broadband Committee for their work, including ongoing review and selection of a preferred provider in March of 2022. So we're rolling right into this budget cycle, really pretty in sync with the work that's been happening with the Broadband Committee and Select Board. The project scope. This includes proposed construction of a municipally owned fiber optic network to all homes and businesses in Reedfield. And this is going to be high level stuff, and I'll move through it quickly, and then we'll have Mark Willett from Axiom speak, who is our preferred provider. And we did select Axiom, and Mark Willett is the president, as the preferred provider. And it was done following a competitive bid process and a very thorough vetting. We met with them multiple times. We met with other service providers, and we had a recommendation that came through unanimously from the Budget Committee and the Select Board. We will be working on construction agreement and a franchise agreement, 2 separate agreements. And those negotiations are ongoing. We talked a little bit about a couple of those things today, actually, when Mark was here early. But we have a good start. And even though things are going to change, I feel very comfortable and confident that we're doing the right things in the right way to have a good process. If approved in June, construction could happen in 12 to 18 months. It is a big project, but it's one that in partnership with the preferred provider and other folks, I think we can actually achieve this. Cost considerations, one of the big questions people always have, but it's important to understand that this network and equipment would be paid for through the tax base, similar to roads, schools, and other utilities and services the town provides. Variable capital costs would be shared by taxpayers based on property value. So, and that would average about $20 to $25 a month for debt service and other considerations associated with building the actual network. So that backbone, that information highway that we'll be putting in place is going to be paid for through that mechanism. And there are some benefits to that, which we'll get into more detail later. But the other part of this is subscriber fees. Those who choose to participate in the network will be paying, and these are very rough numbers, and we're actually probably not going to be doing a 50 megabit service level because even that seems a bit outdated at this point. But we're going to be working on developing a cost structure that's competitive and provides service levels that meet true broadband criteria. And the average total cost, if you add those two up, the rough monthly cost and the rough cost out of tax bill would be about $55 to $60 a month for 100 megabit service. And that may change, but again, I think we're in a very good spot that puts us so we are providing much better service than current options at the same or lower cost. And to me, there's a lot of value in that. There is an option for a $7 a month router fee if you'd like to have Wi-Fi access in your home, if you don't want to purchase your own, which is also an option. And I'll say it again, these figures are not final. This is just the starting point. And we're going to be negotiating with Axiom to get the best rates and services we can for the residents. Some other considerations that I touched on. We are going to have 100% coverage townwide. We will have service up to 1 gigabit. And those are two very important things that we wanted to make sure we achieved. Advertised speeds are guaranteed. They're not up to. A lot of us have services currently that are up to, and up to means about anywhere from 1/4 to 75% most of the time. We have a company that's a preferred provider who is Maine-based. The technical support will be Maine-based. The service technicians will be Maine-based and hopefully regionally based. We should be able to have an employee, or Axiom should, who is local in this region, in Kennebec County or closer. So we will also have low-income assistance. And part of that's going to be through a federal program. Part of it is because we are looking at the tax base for a portion of the cost of this program, which means that if you have a modular home on a rented lot, you're going to be paying a lot less than somebody who has a $400,000, $500,000 home on a lake. And that's, I think, the way that many of us would like to see this cost broken down. Community-owned networks mean that we have local control of service levels and pricing to an extent. We have to negotiate with Axiom to make sure everybody's happy, but we have a lot more control, certainly more than we do with the current service providers. And we have an asset that has real value. I haven't yet been able to figure out what that number is, but we'll be investing millions of dollars in that asset, and we'll retain a lot of that value over the life. The fiber itself could last 40 years, the equipment, depending on how you look at it, but if it's maintained properly and cycled through, at the end of our bond, we could have assets that are worth a couple $1 million, and that's important to know as well. So I will welcome Mark Ouellette, owner of Axiom, and I'll ask him to talk a bit about a few of the things that are on the screen right now. And I will stop my screen sharing so you can all see him. Mark, if you come to the podium, please.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Ouellette. I'm the CEO of Axiom Technologies. Axiom is a internet service provider, and we also have a full service professional services side to our business. So we do a lot of planning with communities and a lot of estimating and getting communities working towards an implementation plan, and then typically providing the service on the backside of that once the construction is completed. So our business for 18 years now has been providing internet service to some of the most rural and difficult places to serve in not just Maine, but all of the United States. In rural Washington County, that's where our roots are. That's where we started. That's where our headquarters are in Machias. And that's where all our employees are. Living in and around Machias, except for me. I live in Scarborough, if you can imagine, 4 hours from Machias. Long story about how that happened. We won't get into it tonight. But our company is really about making sure that communities, rural communities, have the best internet that they can have. And I'm proud to say that when we get done here in Reedfield, you have better internet than people in New York City have, certainly better than what people in Portland have, if you're interested in knowing that. So you're going to have a world-class system here that's going to build, that's going to be in service for, as Eric mentioned, 40 plus years. We're a small company. We're really built on the idea of helping municipalities. And so we work, and this is a budget committee, so I'll talk a little bit about how we sort of operate. We don't work particularly much on the balance sheet side of our business. We don't really build assets. What we work on is the P&L side and building recurring revenue through long-term contracts where we have recurring revenue from subscribers over a period of time. That's really how I'm building my business. It's a little bit more, it's unusual for a business like mine to build their business in that way. What we're finding is that we're getting a lot of success, and you're not the only community entering into an agreement with Axiom. There are 10 to 15 more either in process now getting built or going to be built or in process of getting into a position to be built over the next year. And I expect the number of towns to exponentially grow with working with us, because we're really the only company in Maine that's working to allow that works with communities and not allows them, but works with them even when they want to own their own infrastructure. We're excited about that. We're excited about having an even playing field with the communities that we work with, where there's a relationship built over time, where there's a trust that's built, where pricing and other aspects of the relationship are in a negotiation standpoint and can be talked about and worked through in a clear manner with the community and back with us about what you're trying to achieve and us trying to help you achieve those goals. So, you know, I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to be working with a town like Reedfield. I've been especially encouraged by both your town manager, Eric, and Catherine, who I've recently met, about how sharp they are. And I'm expecting that the rest of the budget committee and those in the community are just as sharp. And I hope you'll welcome us. And I'm certainly here with open arms to listen to any concerns or questions, or try to answer any of your questions as transparently as possible. We're a good company. By the way, just FYI, we grew up as a wireless company, so we have a lot of wireless experience. We also have some old DSL sites that we're transitioning out of. If anybody has lousy DSL service, we have lousy DSL service that we are trying to get rid of slowly in our network in Washington County. So just FYI, we're pretty advanced on understanding all of the technologies out there, what's available, what works, what doesn't. And we really believe that fiber optics is the future. It will stay the future despite all of the other things that people are talking about, and that your system will never be obsolete, essentially. So thank you. And I appreciate your time. And as I said, if I can answer any questions, happy to do that.
Don't go away.
Is that good?
That's great.
All right.
Thank you to Eric and to Mark. Are there any questions from anyone in the room at this time? We'll go with the board first and then to the public. Marty?
Okay. Hi, Mark. I'm Marty Hanish. I'm on the Budget Committee.
Yeah.
And when you began your comments, I think I heard you say that your business model is not to build assets. I assume that means that by building, I think you're really saying accumulating.
That's right.
Right, because if I understand it correctly, your role in this process would be to build this network.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Right. I'm sorry for the
Okay.
misuse of words. Right. What I meant was adding assets to our balance sheet.
Right.
That's really what I meant. And in case of publicly owned assets, obviously, those wouldn't be going onto my balance sheet. Traditionally, in an ISP standpoint, you'd be building networks that you would own. And in this case, that would not be the case. And in that situation, you would be building an asset that you would have on your balance sheet, and then you would depreciate it yourself over time, just like any other asset. In this case, that's not the case. Where we're really building our business is on the P&L, the P&L side, where it's all about recurring revenue and what does that revenue stream look like over a period of time. And really, frankly, that's what I'm selling to the bank or to any other investor or anything like that. When they're looking at my business, I want them to be looking at my P&L side and not really at my balance sheet side. Because while we do build assets, by the way, I just built a project in East Machias and Whiting for $1.6 million. So I just added $1.6 million worth of assets onto my balance sheet. So I'm not against or opposed to that, but my main line of business is to work with communities like yours and allow you to own the assets so that we can have a clearer relationship and a much more balanced relationship than you currently have with your current providers in your community, where you really can't talk to them about pricing, about service levels. You can't talk to them about anything, whereas we're available 24/7 for those kinds of discussions.
Ralph?
So we're gonna be subscriber owned, we're gonna own the network. Can you speak, because you've obviously done this, what that means for us in terms of maintaining that network and what happens when the ice storm hits? Where do we get the service component for owning this subscriber-based network? And then to follow up, as you get more successful, and I presume you will because your business model sounds very sound and you have a success story to tell, what happens when you outgrow us?
So I'll start with the idea of how we would service you in an emergency situation or any kind of break fix situation where something needs to be taken care of. Axiom's going to be working on behalf of the town under a long-term contract. Under that contract, which is currently started to be negotiated, Axiom would be in charge of all emergency repairs, not paying for all emergency repairs, but we would act on behalf of the town to do all of the emergency repairs and everything that needs to get done to make sure that the service is up and running at all times as best as we can. Secondly, as part of that contract, everything from the pole, from the utility pole to the home and inside of the home, even though it's owned by the town, it would be Axiom's responsibility to fix on our dime. No cost to the town or homeowner, unless the homeowner decided to take a backhoe to the line and cut it mistakenly, or a chainsaw, or back in a moving truck and run into the line that's coming from the street. Those kinds of issues, there may be a cost to the homeowner. But generally speaking, in any kind of situation where the lines went down from natural disaster or got cut in some way, or a squirrel chewed through it, we would be fixing those. On the main trunk lines, the trunk lines that come throughout the town, that's an insurable system that we would ask, or the town would be required to have insurance to hold on that main system. And in a catastrophic event, as you suggested, an ice storm or some other event where a drunk driver hit 3 poles and knocked them down, we would still be your repair. We would do the repairs, and you would contact us with one call, and we would take care of all those emergency repairs. And that bill would come back to the town to be submitted to insurance. And there would be a deductible there at some level, and that's being worked out now.
Okay, so basically, depending on how much the town would choose to cover dollar for that kind of trunk line repair, you could spend a lot in premium and have no deductible, or.
Correct.
And how many companies are out there that underwrite this, and what's the market like in that regard, so that we know when we're shopping, are we dealing with one vendor? Are we dealing with 20 or 30, so that perhaps the town gets to shop?
So I'm working on, and I was on a call today with a number of communities, not just here, but around you, who are also on the same path to working with Axiom about this insurance question and what is the best way and the most inexpensive way for the best coverage and reducing the risk. And those are questions that are still today unanswered exactly. But I had my insurance agent on the line today with these communities talking through what kind of insurance would be required, how much of that insurance should Axiom hold versus the town, how does it all work? We are fully insured ourselves, for all of our assets and for everything. So how does that get replicated in the towns, or how much of that could be passed along vis-a-vis the insurance coverage to Axiom, or how much is the deductible going to be? All of those things are still to be answered, but we're working on it now.
Okay, so the idea then is that we wouldn't be the sole beneficiary, if you will, for an insurance coverage policy. We would share that with Axiom at some level, so that if there are damage issues, we would share premium, and we would be co-insureds.
No, it would be one or the other. Either we're insuring the system and we are charging you to insure the system through our insurance, through the main trunk, or you will be buying your own insurance and you will be using your deductible to own the system wholly. Axiom's support of that would come where 95% of the problems come, 98% of the problems come, which is the drops to the home and to the home equipment. That's where the vast majority of failures happen and where the vast majority of issues happen.
I'm sorry, I've taken up a lot of time, but you have experience with this already with other communities that you have served.
Mhm.
In your best judgment situation, which model best serves communities? Riding on your insurance policy or shopping on our own? It would seem to me the larger the pool, the less the risk, but there are cutoff numbers when you get to certain numbers of scale.
Correct. Don't know yet. I think the answer is don't really know yet. Both options are on the table. We are very open to both options. The question will be, what is the best process moving forward? The issue that I see is, as the owner of the system, you want to be able to kick Axiom out if we don't perform. And the more entangled you become with Axiom, the less likely you have that opportunity. And part of the whole idea here is to ensure that the town gets served correctly over a long period of time. And if Axiom doesn't do that service for you over time, I mean, we're all friends here today. But 5 years from now, if we're not friends anymore, what does that mean? And the town needs to have a pathway forward with or without Axiom to keep that system running for its citizens. And we want to keep that entanglement as little, from my perspective, thinking from the town side, you want to keep that entanglement as minimal as possible for a potential future problem, while at the same time, we are sensitive to cost. And if there's a cost situation that is really difficult, we want to be here to help. So we would work that out through the contract to say, we will do this. And if we no longer serve you, this part of the contract that gets turned over to whoever the new ISP is, or however we would work those details in the contract. Does that make sense to everyone?
Thank you for your candor, but it sounds to me like you would be willing to help us broker an insurance coverage package with your volume behind it.
That's what I'm
Thank you.
shooting to do. Yeah,
That's what we're working on.
yeah. Well said.
One approach to the insurance that I saw in a very different context was for a group of would-be insureds to go to a big national broker and have them develop a standard policy. And then the benefit of that is, first, you're getting the real expertise of an insurance broker that really knows the industry. And also, if they develop a standard policy and a number of municipalities were to buy that policy, it saves some money. You know, it saves less, there's less development cost for the broker and the insurer.
Don't disagree with you, but I would only say this. We have to remember how small we are. All of Maine is a suburb of Seattle, 1.3 million people. All of Maine is smaller than West Palm Beach County, all of it. So when we're talking about economies of scale, you're not getting it here. So I think the concept is correct. I think my approach is more in line with how I see insurance looking at rural communities and trying to cobble together the right sort of mix of risk and reward and pricing and deduction, all of the things that you mentioned, to try to make it happen. It is possible that over time, MMA, Maine Municipal Association, could come in and bring a reduced rate policy, sort of uniform policy across all of Maine, or across, right now, there are about 15 communities like you that I'm working with, maybe 20, frankly, I lose count, but 15 to 20 communities, and that's growing, that are thinking about this, asking about this. And so MMA could come in and start to develop something and work with that kind of power of scale for all of the main communities and do exactly what you're saying, which could be a possibility. It just may take a little while longer than you're willing to wait to build the system and get it up and running.
You know, actually, it was through the Maine Municipal Association that my
Yeah.
experience was. Very simple question. Do we have to build or put in our own poles, or do we rent pole space from CMP?
You'll be renting pole space from CMP. You will not be putting in your own poles, except in locations where there are pole gaps or any kind of need for a pole, but we don't see much of that here. So that's what you'd be doing. That cost is absorbed on Axiom's expense side. We would be paying for those pole licensing fees, even though you own the pole licenses as being town owned. It's about $10 per pole per year, just so you know. And you have, I can't remember, 1,200, 1,500 poles here. So it's a really substantial cost, but not anything outrageous.
Great. From the audience, Bruce? I can come back to you.
That's okay. No.
My name is Bruce Burgoyne. I live on the Fog Road. First of all, I just want to say that I really endorse this project. I think it's extremely important. I'm reading right now a book about rural electrification coming to a town in a very remote place and what that did for that town. And I will say that I think there's a great deal of what may be coming in the future that we aren't foreseeing right now that will really change people's lives and help people live very positive existence, if you will, in Reed Field. And so I think we need to bear that in mind. The question I have, or I actually have two questions, but the first one is in respect to the subscriber fees. Are those all locked into the service? Or if we have a very positive uptake or whatever they call it, I know there's a term that they use, take rate for this, will that be applied towards the hardware, towards the building of the network? I mean, where do we
That's
have a
not a
break
question
even
I can
number,
answer,
a break
but Eric
even number there?
Or Mark?
Well, so I'll just start and saying that the model that we're looking at primarily is that any value that's generated from having the take rate that we anticipate would be returned right back to the taxpayer. So we're not looking to have, at least initially, to have the Axiom return dollars to the town of Reed Field. We think that would be a bit too soon for that. Long term, and we got to talk about this as far as the whole negotiation. If we start off with a 45% take rate instead of a 35% take rate, then maybe we'd talk about a rate reduction or something like that. But that's part of the negotiation process. And one of the things that we would consider, because we aren't looking to have the town make any money on this. We want the cost of the capital to be paid out of the tax base because we think it's a universal benefit. And we think that the subscribers should pay for the service. But there is some balance there, I think, and a potential for that. But really, the more subscribers you have, the more bandwidth you need. And that's one of the main cost drivers for the subscription fees. So yeah, it's possible, but we have to negotiate that.
Is there a governance model you're using for, I guess it's like a utility?
Well, we had started that direction with the Western Kennebec Lakes Association, but really we're back to more or less independent operation, the towns working individually. I would hope that long-term, maybe 10 years down the road, we could, if enough of us go this direction, we could pool our resources and have a utility model, maybe buy out some of the debt. Something like that would be, I think, attractive to me and makes sense from a municipal perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
talking more about the governance of it, sort of, whether you're gonna have a board of directors that's focused on just the broadband service delivery and issues that will come up in regards to that. I mean, after establishment is what I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
I'll let Mark.
And I'm just planting
I'll
that
let
out
Mark
there. I'm
answer
not
that
looking
piece.
for an answer.
Oh,
to that
yeah,
tonight.
no.
So where does the signal come from? What are you providing? Okay, so here's my $1,000 question, or my 1 gigabyte question, I should say, is why don't we have, and I've done a lot of reading on fiber, so I'm a little dangerous there, okay? why can't everybody have a gigabyte? What is the reasoning for tiered pricing? Because that signal is at full signal rate, no matter where it is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I sit here? Do this?
Absolutely.
Can you hear me?
I'm not debating, so I'm happy to sit that.
No,
sit
no,
back
you can
down.
debate. There are two reasons. The first is people don't really know how expensive bandwidth here is. Backhaul bandwidth, the bulk bandwidth is quite expensive. It's on the pennies in Boston and it's on the dollars in Maine because the internet service, the backhaul service is based on miles it needs to travel. It travels over people's internet system and they charge by the mile to do that. So you get not just the bandwidth cost itself, the cost of the actual bulk internet, but you also have to put on top the cost, what we call transport. So it makes it very expensive. Secondly, because of that, when you offer a gig, in many places where people are being offered a gig, they're being offered an up to gig speed because it's not feasible for the cost to provide everybody with a gig and ensure that they get a gig at all times, because you have to have so many gigs to provide gig service. So when people provide gig service, like in Google cities and such, they're providing an up to speed, and you can see that when you do your speed test. We're not into that. We want to provide a guaranteed gig service if we provide it. Third, at a gig level, it's as soon as somebody provides a gig, and you say everybody's going to get a gig for a certain amount of money, the first call that comes in is, why don't you offer a lower cost for a lower speed? I only want 50 bags. If you charge $99 for a gig, that means I can get my 10 megabits that I need for $10, right? It becomes a very difficult sales and marketing situation to try to address. So I think we are moving towards the model that you're describing. I think eventually it's going to be a big ubiquitous gig service. That's what people are going to require and demand. But right now, people are looking for tiered service. It's interesting. They want to have a choice moving up to a gig. But your system, as we put it in, is capable of delivering a gig to every home, a symmetrical gig to every home. It's also going to be, if you believe this, capable of delivering probably 8 or 10 gig, over 10 gig services to an individual home. 10,000 megabits per second, over 10,000 megabits per second. That's currently a level of service that Jackson Labs use, for example, high level institutions, universities, those kinds of things. So the capability is going to be there for your town for a very long time and available. And eventually the system, that architecture that we put in place, is going to be, with some changes to the electronics that are going to not be very expensive 10 years from now, capable of delivering 10G over 10G to every home, with a change in equipment at the home and a change in equipment in the CO. Not too expensive, but some cost.
Thank you for that explanation. I guess I would just challenge the town to not accept necessarily that tiered pricing is what people want. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure that's borne out in reality. I would also urge the town to stay connected with the hospital and other people that might be doing telemedicine or those kinds of operations, so that we know we can keep up with that, because that's really what we're promising. We're not promising fiber coming into your home so you can watch Disney Plus. I don't think. Yes, maybe that's part of it, but really it's to make people's lives as a whole a lot better. And then my final closing comment is, I think, talking about the long-term subscriber benefit to people is really extremely important, in understanding the mechanics of the pricing, and anything we can do is, as in public meetings or whatever, to explain that as well as we can. And we're doing it a bit tonight, but anything we can do to shine a light on that will be helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Durgan?
I appreciate the mister. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yes.
Greg.
Bruce had the 1 gigabyte question. I got a half MB thing for you. I'm happy with what I have now at our house. Been happy with it. It's by a company that starts with a big S. Okay. What can you say to the average Joe? I'm an average Greg, to convince me to change to the town system
I don't know. if I-
in 20 words or
You don't
less?
have to touch anything. It's always on.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Um,
So be
Two
careful.
things. Yeah, so be careful. Yeah, two things. First, I believe that under the new service, you will actually save money. You will not spend more money because the world is working towards a one pipe system and all of your entertainment, telemedicine, education content, virtual reality, the metaverse, everything is coming over one pipe. And so the world is changing very rapidly. So you're going to get a better service with more consistent reliability than what you have now and better speed levels, even at lower tier service than what you think you have now, is going to work better because of the type of technology that we're delivering that service with, which is fiber, which is pulses of light versus, anyway, long story. But anyway, the way the technology works. So that's one. Two, when I say save money, I mean by cutting the cord and by cutting out the expensive service and delivering your content, whatever it is you want over a different system should save you money over your current big S system that what you have right now. And you also get to use your cell phone over the internet for free. Most smartphones can work seamlessly, even if you have poor cell service in your home, that you can use the internet. So you could actually save money on not even having a phone at your house. You could use your cell phone at all times. So there are a lot of benefits to fiber, and there are a lot of them that we don't even are aware of that people are working on today that 5 years from now are going to be ubiquitous and it's going to be available to you. So I think over time, you're going to see the old cable idea system is slowly dying.
Okay, I knew there'd be a cost change. I listened to you, but just if cost wasn't a factor, it wouldn't, and you answered it, so thank you. Okay.
Can I just follow up on?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to follow up on Greg's section.
Oh, do you see you did, Greg?
You know, and this is on the take rate and talking to subscribers of the big S. What we're talking about here in this town, as far as I know, okay, is not a nonprofit utility. Okay, we're not in this to make money. So, matter of fact, I would expect the big S is probably going to try to undercut pricing here initially, folks. I mean, I think they're going to have a sale. I think that's their mode of operation. But in the long run, a nonprofit utility that's well governed is going to deliver you superior service, if you will, at a rate that on the steady in the long run, you're going to be fine. Because if the big S can squeeze this out, then I think the rates in 2 years for that company will look a lot different.
Thank
I agree
you.
with that.
Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to ask a question or make a comment? I'm not seeing anybody raising a hand. Well, I had a few things I was going to say, but between all of you, you've pretty much taken care of that. I just do want to mention for folks who are not here tonight that there are 2 handouts that we gave to folks in the room tonight. And I'm going to ask Eric to post those on the internet, so they will be there on the town website tomorrow. And that's just the beginning of a publicity campaign that we're making to promote this idea and new service that we're proposing for the town of Reedfield. We are actively pursuing, we are actively developing in addition to the town website as we speak. And we'll be sending out promotional materials in the mail, as well as having meetings and having things posted online. Subscribe to our e-alerts to get more information as it becomes available. And with that, I think we will move on. Thank you, everybody, for your participation in that. So we'll turn it back over to Eric and we'll start in on the community park and conservation project. And those of you who were here just for broadband, if you want to leave, we won't be offended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, you have my cell phone number. Anybody can call me anytime. If you don't have my cell phone number, I have it and can give it to you. So no problem at all. Anything
Okay.
you need. Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
There were 2 handouts tonight for the community park as well. The ball field project, as it is sort of called. One is a detailed diagram of the court space or the field space. The other is an overall project, and those are already available online on the town website.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. I'll see if I can get this one going again.
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly. Bill,
Yeah.
we're getting some feedback here right behind Andy and I. If that's okay, that's fine. But if not, I just thought we'd let you know.
It's his audio monitor in the back.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm hearing it right here.
I think it's coming from the back.
Bill could tell us, but I'm guessing it's more than 6 or 7. Yeah, no, I think Catherine had asked, but nobody had asked.
Can you hear it? Maybe right here in the speaker.
Oh, yeah, there are, yep.
Thank you. Okay, Eric, we're all set.
All right, thanks. So I'll try to move through a similar discussion of background, scope, cost, and other considerations for this project. And the goal really with the community park and conservation project is to provide more recreational opportunities to our residents and youth while maintaining a balance with conservation and other uses of the fairgrounds property. We've had that property for over a few decades in town. It's a wonderful place, and we believe that we can enhance that through some additional infrastructure. The town priority has been for just a few years, not quite as long as broadband, but the pandemic has shown us very much that this is something we need to focus on. In 2021, there was a vote for planning and design work. And in 2022, we've engaged in a process to involve stakeholder groups and develop final plans for town meeting vote. And that's not going to go. There we go. Nope. Doesn't want to. Okay, so there we go. Project scope. We are looking at the addition of a softball field, basketball court, kiosk, concession stand, pollinator garden, trails, and associated utilities and structures at the town fairgrounds property. It would essentially make a portion of that property, another acre or so, into a true community park. The focus is on minimizing impacts to natural areas while delivering built facilities to support sports uses. We know that there will be environmental impacts, there will be a loss of some habitat, but we want to balance that out. The plan is similar to the original project design that saw the building of the ball field that is there currently on the facility and the expansion of the parking area. And as I noted, the habitat and wetland impacts, we will be working hard to make sure those are mitigated on site as well as on other town properties. And one of the ones we've talked about prominently is the old landfill site and doing some pollinator plantings there to help offset the loss of some of the habitat for pollinators at the fairgrounds. Okay, cost considerations. Given the topography of the site, the location of the fields makes a very big difference in cost. It's a little bit hilly, and so early projections ranged anywhere from $386,000 to $514,000 because of the amount of fill that would have been required to be moved around on some of those plans. The revised current plan calls for much less fill and will be closer to the lower end of that scale. We're not 100% sure, but the anticipated cost is now in the range of $350,000 to $450,000, we believe, and that includes a 20% contingency. So we have tried to build in some of the unknowns, which you always have when you're working with earthwork and construction projects. We are still working on concept plans, but we will have engineered plans before town meeting if all goes the way we would like it to. We do have some excellent architects and engineers. Regina Leonard, who is our landscape architect, has done a phenomenal job of bringing a lot of different perspectives together to make this new site plan. And the engineer firm we've worked with is Mainland Development, who has been doing projects for the town of Reedfield for I guess a few decades now, probably off and on. And they actually worked on the original site plan for this project. I don't know why my keyboard's not working, but I'm gonna try to do this. So other considerations are that the fairgrounds property is really ideally located to support recreational infrastructure. It is sandwiched between two of our main schools and the sidewalk. It's right near the center of town, and it already gets a lot of public use, so it's a good position for it, I believe. The improvements are consistent with the multi-use purpose of the property. We are respecting as much as possible the conservation values that are there and the conservation goals, but also looking to make the best and highest public use out of that property by working on some of these improvements. Other sport fields exist in town, but access is limited, and adding a softball field does improve fairness. Having I won't say gender specific, but a sport that's for girls and women traditionally that doesn't have a place in our community is a problem. And we would like to address that by making sure that we have equity in who gets to use our town properties. And again, we're going to try to mitigate those environmental impacts. So that's my real short description of the plan. We do have plans available on the town website. They're also available here at the town office. We will be modifying those plans in the coming month. We already know that the ball field is more or less where we want it. A lot of the other features may need to be looked at, but we do know what we want. The basketball court location may be tweaked a little bit depending on if or how we can modify or work around wetlands that are there. And so there's going to be changes. I don't want people to think that what you're going to see is final, because it's absolutely not. But we're working on it, and I think that we're going to have a good outcome ultimately that balances competing public interests in some cases. I do want to thank the Conservation Commission, the Historical Society, the Recreation Committee, and the Trails Committee for their work to develop and shape this project. It's been a bit bumpy at times, but I really appreciate everybody coming together and working together to put this project forward in a way that might not have, I think everybody has to make some concessions and make balances, but that's how community works. So I will move on and welcome Hannah Flannery from the Rec Committee, who will talk a bit about this project from their perspective, as they are the more or less the project sponsor for these improvements to the facility. So Hannah, if you could come to the podium, please. I'll stop sharing my screen and let you talk.
Thank you. So this, the plan started rolling when COVID started happening, and we had no access to any fields in town because all of the fields are owned by the school system. So at that time, I recall the plan that showed the fields and soccer fields and all of the layout of this, where just the baseball field had gotten built. So I contacted Eric and asked what could be done to revive that plan. And that started the ball rolling along the process. We have worked to what now we have as a nicely landscaped and developed plan that is really an asset to the town, I believe. It's a huge asset to our rec programs. Currently, we're looking at our spring season, and we don't really have a viable softball field that is really useful. It's one that needs severe improvements that we can't make the investment in doing because it's not owned by the town. And we're still doing a little travel basketball. All these kids are super excited about basketball, and it would be really cool to be able to say, yes, and now when the snow melts, you can just go outside and keep playing. So we love the location is central. It's walking distance to the beach, to the library. Summertime and good weather, I think it'll just be, it'll get a ton of use by the location. And I really look forward to the use and seeing the community come together with this whole project. So here for any questions or any more details.
Are there any questions from anyone sitting on the tables? How about from anyone in the audience?
You asking for questions?
Sure, questions or comments? Sure.
Excuse me. Thank you, Hannah. My name is Greg Durgan, and I'm representing myself, not any committee I might happen to be on. If I have an agenda, it's probably that I want to preserve the fairgrounds as much as possible in the current state they are in terms of for pollinators and recreation and so forth. I'm not anti-kid, I'm not anti-softball field. When this whole project started, I was a little concerned, very concerned. And then through listening to Hannah and some other people in town and working on a couple of places, I came to the realization that when I finally saw where the field is placed now, that's probably what we need. We need a softball field, and I can support that wholeheartedly. A couple of issues I can't support is the rush that the select board and maybe the budget committee, although I've not been involved with that as much, a rush to, I guess, judgment. I had talked to someone at the school, the director of operations, grounds and operations, about the possibility of using the current field at the elementary school. The elementary school was owned by the town and the land on it. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but I think that's what you told me. And we gave that to the RSU, the CSD at the time. Sean Drinkwater was very willing to sit down with anybody and talk about the use, the upgrade, whatever they wanted to do at that field. Neither the select board was willing to pursue that, nor the rec committee. Catherine, you mentioned that we can't spend money, town money on private property and so forth. The Trails Committee in the town actually worked with the RSU several years ago to build that beautiful trail from the end of the fairgrounds down to the school. So things could have been done. My guess is, I'm not an engineer, but a nice planned program over there, including a concession stand, probably could be done at a much lower rate than the projections cost that Eric was giving tonight. I don't think anybody really looked at that. It's town money. It's $500,000 plus or minus. So I'm just disappointed, and I said that at a couple of other meetings, that the select board and the rec committee couldn't look at alternative sites. The school, the elementary school is a fairly central location. It's used for soccer. The rec department puts on great programs. My daughter went through them. My grandchild's going through them now. I don't have an issue with the rec department. They're volunteers like everybody else. But I think the town was remiss about where to place it, how to proceed, and I'm just disappointed it's gone that way. Eric is right. It's not the final plan. I was at the fairgrounds on Saturday or Sunday, and if the basketball court were there now, it would be underwater. There's a lot of fill that we have to drag in there. If we're going to move it, it's going to be closer to the cemetery. Cemetery committee may get involved with that. I'm bothered that you didn't take some more time and look at alternative sites. And I guess that's it. By the way, the two committees, Trails and Conservation, have not taken any votes, either pro or against this project. So I know we're mentioned in there, those committees are mentioned there, but we've submitted information, but there's no yes up or down on that project. So that's it.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all opinions. I'm not sure that Eric said that anybody was supporting or not supporting the project, but just that those different parties had been involved in the process and participated.
That was certainly my intent anyway, if that's not exactly what I said. Yeah, but no.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Yes, Bruce?
Yeah, I just have actually.
Okay,
What is timing on the sidewalk project?
can you wait till you get to the mic? please?
Sure. My name is
Thank
Bruce
you.
Burgoyne, Fog Road. What is the timing on the sidewalk project? Will that link up with the timing of this project.
That's a
terms
fair
of-
question.
It just seems to me that if you're going to have that level of activity there, that the sidewalk is going to be, very important to that.
Yeah, so the sidewalk is going to be funded through federal grant dollars primarily. The town has a share. We've had a plan in place for a couple of years now, but basically it's a 5-year plan. We're in essentially year 2, which is the design phase. And then we have a couple years of planning and a couple years of construction thereabouts. So it will be happening before the sidewalk is put in. There's a risk that the sidewalk may not be put in. There is some strong opposition from a couple of residents about that, and we'll have to work with that or through that in one way or the other. But right now, I'd say that likely we would, if we were aggressive in how we approached it, it would be probably 3 years before we had the actual proper sidewalk put in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Ralph.
For Eric, in regard to the development project, is there an economy of scale to be had by consolidating the recreation facilities in one particular location? And I'm new to the town, comparatively speaking. Wasn't that the original intent, although the process for development languished somewhat? And then secondarily, the alternative site at the elementary school, does that necessarily lend itself to a regulation size field? And when you couple that with the fact that we have parking and traffic issues there that might need to be addressed, where that property, quote unquote, surplus property might be better utilized, just your thoughts on that.
Well, so I think the last two might be a little bit rhetorical, but I agree. I don't believe that the site that's there is a size that's appropriate. There is not enough parking at that facility to accommodate. We already have problems. So your points are well taken. I also think that having sidewalks that connect and having the prospect of an additional is a real value. So no, I feel that the location that we are working with now, the Reed Field Fairgrounds property, really is the best. With all due respect to Greg, it really is the best spot. And I think it's been heading that direction for a while. And its efficiency is one thing when it comes to dollars and cents. And I think there will be efficiency there if this is approved. But I also think that when you're a parent and you have kids and you're trying to do multiple youth sports, having a girl in baseball, a girl in softball and a boy in baseball, or vice versa, whatever, it's helpful to have that ability to have your little kids occupied playing basketball while your middle schooler is playing softball. I think that's some of the efficiency that really happens when you have consolidated facilities like that. I'm personally looking forward to going there and playing with my son playing basketball, and my wife and my daughter might go for a walk. Those are the type of things that you can do as a family that you can't do that on South Road. It just can't happen. So
One follow-up thought.
One follow-up, and then we're going to move on to the budget part.
As an individual member of the select board, I do believe that we have given considerable due diligence to discussion and consideration of this issue. And all of the headings that I have mentioned, I think we have covered to the best of our ability. Nobody's ever going to be 100% happy, but I feel that in moving this forward in the warrant, as I believe we are going to do, that we have done our due diligence and we have done the best we can to take into account all of the various considerations and opinions that are out there. It's a nuanced discussion, but I feel that what we are going to recommend is the best way forward in terms of value for the taxpayers and service to the community.
Thank you, Marty.
Okay, I'll try to be brief because I know you want to move on to other topics. I wanted to respond to a comment that Greg made about the budget committee role in this. I just want to clarify that, at least in my mind, it's not the role of the budget committee to opine on whether a particular project is in the best interest of the town. Our role is to look at it from a financial perspective, and we haven't reached that yet. I'm hoping by the time the Budget Committee is asked to vote supports or does not support each of the items in the budget warrant, each of the budget items in the warrant, that we will have more information, not relating to whether something is, is better for the town or not better for the town, but how it fits into the budget for the coming year and for the years after that. And I don't think we have that information yet. So that will be the Budget Committee role, as far as I understand it, is to look at it from a financial perspective. I may have my own opinions as to whether something is a great idea or not, but on the Budget Committee, I'm only looking at how these projects affect the budgets for the coming year and for the years after that. Just wanted to clarify that for Greg.
Thank you. I know that there are revised figures coming in for both projects, the community park project as well as broadband, and those include other sources of funding. There are grants being considered, not so much on the broadband at this point in time, although they may come down in the fall. But I know that the rec board is working on different funding sources through grant applications, which would greatly affect the cost. And I believe the cost has already been downgraded from the 500,000 that you were talking about,
Yes.
386 to 5 something. Do you know what the current figure is in the budget? I know we'll see it in a few minutes.
Well, we budgeted for the worst case scenario at up to 500,000, but that's because we have some unknowns around what kind of mitigation we might be doing. The project, if it gets moved, there's still we need to have an engineering plan to know exactly how much fill we're going to need, how much cut, how much work. That depends in part on where things are located, in large part. And so if the basketball court is to stay where it's proposed, that would be a fair amount of fill. There's no question about that. I don't think that's the best idea to leave it where it's at right now. But there are a couple spots that it could be moved to that might need more trail work. So until we have the final concept plan, we can't do the final engineering plan. And so that's why it's so important for people to come to consensus on what this should look like and then move ahead.
Okay. Yes, Greg. And well, if it's okay with everyone in the room, we'll call
One
this
more
our
question.
last question.
One more question. Is there going to be an attempt to bring Regina back? When she was there, it was January and there probably was 1.5 feet of snow. Now that the snow's gone, still a little ice up there. Is she going to come back and take a look at that?
Yeah, no, we have another, we have actually, there's going to be a stakeholder meeting with the property abutters next Thursday, the folks that live in the property that's directly adjacent to the facility. And then after that, we will have one more meeting essentially to sort things out and review the revised plan that will take into account all of the comments that we've received from the boards and committees, the abutters, and then we'll, talk at, and the members of the public that have been commenting as we've moved forward with the project. So yes, short answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your participation. It is greatly appreciated. So now we will move on to discussing revenue and expenses and then some budget summaries.
Okay, let me do the screen share again here. This is where things start to get boring, so I'll try to be quick about it.
Wait a minute, the end of the meeting is going to be boring and you want us to stay awake?
All right, so we talked a lot about the plans. We haven't had a chance to look at them yet, but for anybody that doesn't have a copy at home, or this is the general layout. And I'll just point out that the upper right-hand corner is the existing baseball field. The softball field would be catty corner to that. And we have the existing parking lot, and the proposal is to have the basketball court in the area where it is now. If it moves, it would either move closer to Church Road or do a little bit of a leapfrog and move to the opposite side of a wetland that's would run through right now the upper right-hand corner of that court. There's also a kiosk shown, or a small snack stand shown. We would have a kiosk. We'll have a dedicated spot for the portable toilets. We do have those on site now, but they're basically dumped in the parking lot, and that's really not ideal. So there is some planning going to this. There's an idea for the pollinator garden to be someplace in between the basketball court area and the fields, the ball fields. And the trails would be modified as needed to have a good consistent flow that makes sense, and also to make sure that there's no loss of continuity or flow for the people using the trails. One thing you will notice is that there's no longer a road running through the middle of the field down to the existing ball field. That is one of the better, I think, changes to this plan. It'll remove that and return that to a field-like state visually more than anything else, because it's not a wide strip, but visually it really cuts things apart, and it will promote less intense mowing, as we had traditionally used that for supplemental parking and things like that. But anyway, that's the site plan in summary, and then we have the layout, and this shows the value, some of that value Ralph was talking about, of having two fields together. We can then have a full-size soccer field in the middle for fall season, or we can have some youth fields and an intermediate field. And on the very far right, you have the possibility of having pickleball, which is the thing apparently. I've never played it, but pickleball on the basketball court, if that's something people would like to do. So anyway, this is available on the town website. And like I said, it will change, but this is, I think, a very good start of the type of facilities and the general locations.
And we'll be building shuffleboard courts somewhere nearby soon for the other aging population in town.
I'm not sure that's popular anymore, but yeah, we'll consider it.
You can get on a cruise ship for that.
All right, so I'm going to move on to revenue highlights, and talk about the revenue first, and then we'll talk about funds, designated and undesignated funds, which are a component of the revenue stream, but one of the most important. And then we'll close out with expense discussion and summary, and some summary points about the overall budget. So for the third year in a row now, we're looking at a 10% factoring for residential tax base to match state valuation. We have to keep pace with them, so they are driving this change in value. We also have what is I consider a real change, which is the 1.5% increase to the tax base for new construction and renovations. And both of those things have been moving at quite rapid pace. Looking forward, I don't expect that to continue at the same rate that it is now, especially with the cost of labor and materials all being in flux at the same time. The revenue lines were carefully reviewed for changes based on COVID-19 impacts, and many were increased from the prior year. So we were very cautious, very conservative the last 2 years, to the point, I think, of great caution, which was smart, but we don't need to be that way. At least history has shown us that we don't have to be that way as much as we were. State revenue sharing was increased to $400,000 to account for full funding. And I have full in parentheses because I guess it should be full, not funding, but we haven't had that. This is the first year in which the state of Maine would actually be, over the last several years anyway, honoring the legislative commitment to provide 5% of state revenues to municipalities. So that makes a real difference for us. It's not just being tucked away into the rainy day fund where it was previously. It's being returned to the taxpayers where it belongs, in my view. And motor vehicle revenues are up $75,000. That's conservative. We could push it up more, but we know that motor vehicle sales have slowed lately, so we're not going to be too aggressive on that one. I don't know why this isn't working, but it's probably because the screen shared. Revenue highlights continued. Designated fund use is up by about $60,000. That's in large part because we have more active projects that we'll be pursuing. Use of undesignated funds is budgeted to be flat. We anticipate bond proceeds of upwards of, and these are both up to amounts, 550,000, 5.5 million, excuse me. If the borrowing is approved for both of the projects, and I'll point out that borrowing for the broadband project was actually approved in November of this year, and the broadband project would be on the warrant in June. New ARPA funds of 135,000 plus are anticipated. We first received the first half of that this year. Total transfer station revenues are up about $11,000. And First Park revenue is again stable and going to be revenue neutral once you account for the expense side of things. So this is the revenue summary in graphic form. It shows the things that I just described. We do have some reductions, notably in parks and recreation. That's in part because the first year of the beach being free to residents, we had partial revenue from the prior season. We don't have that this year. Additionally, we do expect some dip as a result of COVID in those revenues because it takes a little time to rebuild after sports are shaken up for a year or two. I want to back up here a little bit. That was too far. The big number increase here is capital improvements, 1,024% increase. That's just the fact that the revenue for bonds shows up in that line, and it does crazy things to the percentage rates. This is the graphical representation of those revenue numbers. Same thing. You see some increases in administration, which are not inconsequential. You take away the capital improvements, and the administration line is still $500,000 increase, and that's coming from a couple sources. This chart here breaks down what those administration revenues are. You see that we have about a 240,000, 250,000 almost increase in tax revenue because we are having to increase taxes after 2 years of reduction in taxes. And we have some increase coming from both the town side and the school side. The state revenue sharing you see up by $175,000. So even though we've increased it to the 400, we were quite low before, being conservative because we didn't trust the revenue projections necessarily that were coming in. And we didn't trust that they were going to actually honor their commitment. Both of those things they've done. They met their revenue projections and they honored their commitment. So I'm comfortable showing that they actually will fund us at full cost. And then we have 75,000 as noted in the motor vehicles. So that's just a breakdown that shows more detail. And that covers revenue. I'll move on to funds. But before I do, I want to ask if there are any questions about revenue lines, and I'll stop screen sharing for just a moment so we can talk.
Yes, Marty.
Yep. The revenue sharing is an interesting one. We're showing a 78% increase. That seems, too good to be true. But if you go back a couple of years, to the pre-pandemic years, go back 4 years, it's a 27% increase over 4 years. So I think even though it's one that I'm sure that Eric and Teresa are going to worry about during the year to see if the state does live up to that commitment. But I don't think it's not a made-up number.
It's really nice that the state is following through on its commitment. So
So
it's very helpful to all the residents.
the other thing I wanted to mention about that is that the state, like the municipalities, faces a lot of demands on its resources, what it has to parcel out for different things. So I think it would be a good idea, through the Maine Municipal Association, to really encourage them to lobby really hard on that one item. the revenue sharing, because we've seen before that fund gets rated for other state needs.
And this is one of those items that very quickly affects every taxpayer.
Yep.
Because it's a direct bill to your pocket personally when they withhold those funds, because the town has to recover that money. Okay, I guess we can move on to
I
funds.
think
Eric.
Greg had a,
Oh, Greg, sorry, did not mean to miss you.
Catherine, thank you for continuing to recognize me so I can speak. I think it's a question for Eric, and I'm not setting you up, Eric. We talked about this before.
okay.
You have a rough ballpark figure on how much money the town has received, federal and state, in COVID relief funds?
Yes. So
Would you like to give it to us?
well, it is, so this year we received 135,770 plus or minus a couple dollars. We expect to receive 135,770 plus or minus a couple dollars next year. Yep. And those funds are restricted to certain uses, including water and sewer and broadband infrastructure. We don't have much of a water system. It doesn't really need a lot of investment. We have a great management by the Winthrop Utilities District. And broadband really has been the focus of that. So just to clarify and to point out, we are planning on allocating the second half of that towards broadband. The first half, we had applied a lot of it to broadband, $40,000 or $50,000 so far for planning and inventory work. So that's been part of it. And then we also added hazard pay, but not what is the better word for that? Premium pay for COVID for municipal employees across the board. And that's something that we'll talk about on the expense side when we get to it, is that in order to be competitive and address the COVID impacts, we are going to be continuing that premium pay to ensure that we can attract and retain good employees. So that's the use of those funds so far. Yeah.
Eric, I think another piece of what Greg asked is at the state level, what funds? I believe we did receive some funds that we used maybe for some beach employee time last summer and to provide some masks. And
Did you
maybe
ask
the
what
fire
state-
department got some money also that way?
Yeah, so we did receive some COVID emergency relief funds from the state of Maine. It was probably $20,000 to $40,000. It's been about 6 months. I've looked at the numbers because we turned in our reports and we were done. But yeah, we had some state funds that did help with buying PPE. We actually have a decent stockpile in the basement, which I hope we never get into. But we also paid staff time to have extra cleaning and things like that done. So yeah, for a more full answer.
Thank you both. Good question and great answer.
All right, so I will go back to my screen share. And fund highlights in just a second. Here we go. So we do use our funds actively, designated and undesignated funds, to stabilize the mill rate and offset capital expenditures. This is one of the best tools we have, and we use it, like I said, actively. Fund balances are conservative. We always try to ensure that if we are anticipating a drawdown, that we don't ever overdraw these funds or over leverage them by having too much come out. We also, when we have revenues going in, we try to be conservative on that side so that we know that we'll never under budget the revenue side, which can be a problem. Use of designated funds is up by $59,983. Again, because of some just the transition in projects and what we're focusing on at the time. And we have flat funding for undesignated funds. And that's something that I can talk about a little bit more. Just to say that the undesignated fund balance is where we put revenue that came in at the end of the year last year from unexpended school or unallocated school appropriation. Trying to find a way to say that's actually sensible, but basically we got a budget from the school got a bunch of money from the federal government and they billed us less. So that money went right into the undesignated fund to help offset what we knew was coming this year, which was a sizable increase. I'll talk more about that later. The use of the 212s policy. We are going to be under our threshold. We want to be at 100% of the 212s. So that means that we want to have, of all of our expenditures, we want to have 2 months money in reserve. This year, we have projected and included in the budget $5.5 million in capital projects, which really throws a wrench in that ratio. I'm going to talk about it with the select board. We might want to think about how we look at the number, but this is just an explanation of why we're not meeting that threshold. And I think it makes sense. The graphic here shows the fund balances over time. The red or orange is the designated fund balance. And that's the special project funds. You see back in 2020, we had a big spike there. That balance was due to the fact that we had started the fire department and library expansion projects, but had not completed them. So we had a big bump. We spent the money, and all of a sudden that designated fund dropped right back down to a more traditional level. And we'll see some spikes like that going forward, but that's the reason for that large spike. And our undesignated fund balance has been very stable over the past several years. Again, we use it responsibly, and we use it to balance out tax impacts. So any questions on fund balances? If there's not, I'll move on, but I'll wait a second. Okay. Greg, you scratching your head or?
He does not have a question. 'Cause I
All right, I didn't want you to skip over them again. All right, so expense highlights. We'll move on and talk about this. Administration, general, labor, and insurance costs are up $28,442. This is primarily due to pandemic-related changes. The cost of insurance, the cost of labor, direct result here. The job market, as you know, has changed. We've also seen an increase in the minimum wage of like 50% over 4 years, which has had an impact of pushing wages upwards. That's also happening at the same time we're seeing these other impacts. So you'll see that trend throughout. I'll mention it in almost every department or not, because we've talked about it already. But assessing and code enforcement are up as well. That's due to wage adjustments and increased demand. Legal fees are up $25,000 to a total of $50,000. And that's quite plainly due to the threat of litigation. I just want to make a point that we are prepared to protect residents' rights and the integrity of the town against lawsuits. And I'll move on from that one because it's a tough point. Maintenance, we have an increase there as well, mostly labor. And also materials costs, more so with maintenance than with administration. This one does not want to settle. There it goes. All right. Community services, we have a $4,915 reduction in ACO due to the removal of duplicate payments for wages and stipend. We have a $3,500 stipend for this position. And because we're not, it's no longer a position held by a union employee, we're not also paying separate wages and overtime on top of the stipend. So that's been a savings this year. I don't know if that's going to continue because it always could be picked up at some point by a union employee. But for this year, that is a savings that we've realized. The library is up by $7,262. Again, primarily labor and insurance costs. We have a $1,750 increase in streetlights. The actual cost of the streetlights is about $1,500 a piece, maybe a little bit less. But we had a budget that was around $4,500 last year. So we are planning on installing 5 new streetlights. I just want folks to know that that is not the operating cost. The reason we're able to install these lights is because we're saving hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a year on electricity costs to CMP. So we're doing better by the environment, and long-term, we're going to be saving a lot of money and making our town safer. Moving on to parks and recreation, we have an increase of $1,100 for beach needs, increase in heritage days of around, I think it was 1,000 or 1,500 for, I called it a post-pandemic bump. We haven't been able to have a proper heritage days for 2 years. We want to put a little bit more money into entertainment and making it a real show and community building event. We have a $2,668 increase in trails due to no prior year materials purchase and no reserve. So they're basically rebuilding their stock of materials and having a little bit of a reserve available in the event that we have additional project work that needs to be accomplished. Protection. Ambulance budget is up by 15,290, and I say per Winthrop. It's really Winthrop Ambulance Service, and they have a quasi-independent budget that we contribute towards. And they're struggling just as we are with labor costs and even availability. So we want to make sure we fund them to the full extent so they can meet those needs. Cemeteries, we have a $3,000 reduction. That's just a small change in the scope of the work that they are performing at the cemetery. Some years they have bigger projects than others. Roads and drainage, we have a $78,000 increase in winter road expenses. This one covers a 2-year period. We had a very sizable and unplanned increase in the cost of winter roads maintenance this year because of a sole bid situation. And we have to account for that, absorb that, and then move ahead with a planned potential increase. This number may change. We will be getting bids back next Thursday. So if they come in at a more reasonable rate, we will be able to hopefully drop this number down. And if not, then we'll at least know what it is and we can budget for it accurately. But I just wanted to point out that's a 2-year change, not just a 1-year adjustment. Capital improvements, we're going to have a few items here, but we have $9,000 for completing the digital conversion of our PEG station, which includes all the equipment out back and all the wonderful things that Bill does with it. We have up to $5 million for broadband internet. We have $10,000 increase in savings for Guile Hall. That'll bring it up to $20,000 total for the year. We have up to $500,000 for the fairgrounds project. We have a $15,000 line for library parking lot paving, $50,000 for the open space fund. And I want to point out that's an increase from $10,000. This is one of those points that the select board, many boards and committees, many residents have said is a true priority in large part because we're growing as a town. And we know that we don't have that many important ecologically or scenic or however properties left. And we want to try to maintain those to help maintain property value and the character and aesthetic of our community. We have $350,000 for paving and infrastructure. Of that, we have $200,000 for a paving reserve and $150,000 for a sand salt storage building to be built near the existing one, which is basically on a downward cycle. It peaked probably a decade ago and is no longer worth putting the maintenance dollars into it. So it will run its course. I'll put it that way. We have ongoing lease payments and reserve at the transfer station as well. Solid waste, we have an $18,000, $19,000 almost increase in expenses. Again, contracted service costs, which relate to fuel costs, labor costs, insurance costs. Education, we estimate a base increase of 10%. We hope it's that low, but the last number we saw from the school board was 13 plus. And that at 10% would be $346,000. Again, a large portion of that this year is going to be offset by reserves. Debt service, we would have a rough payment of new payment of $88,257. Just quick breakout on that. A portion of that will be the actual interest payment for the municipal bond or bonds if we have to. We would consolidate them administratively, but for the sake of argument, they're separate for 2 separate projects. One of the pieces that's not shown here that is important also is a bond anticipation note that if the town proceeds with the municipal broadband project, we're in process to secure a bond anticipation note that we would then exercise as after town meeting vote to purchase the materials and equipment that may have a 6-month or 8-month lead time to get those on site so we can stay ahead of construction and make sure that we are able to provide those pieces that are needed to build the network. So there's going to be a small $14,000, $15,000 cost that's in this number for that one component. Moving on to unclassified, the overlay was reduced by $197,952. again, the normal level is 25,000. Last year it was 50,000. So if you add the 50,000 that we had last year and the 170,000 that was put in there from the school, you get the 197. So I just wanted to point out that a lot of that reserve and why it's such a big change is because we had that school money in there that's likely not going to be in there this year. So we're back to a more normal level, $25,000, and that covers things like abatements and any overages that we may see, but we're very, very good about not having those. So this is the graphic representation. A lot of black, not much red. Capital improvements is the big one. And it's the same story, really, as what we talked about with revenues. About an 80% change, both directions, 80% increase in revenues, 80% increase in expenditures. They offset. Moving on, you see capital improvements is a towering number. But again, this is being bond financed, so the actual impact on the tax base is minimal. I shouldn't say minimal. It's minimal this year. We will see a bump next year, but we're already planning and thinking about that and how we're going to manage it. A lot of that would come from the broadband project, which again, with the proposal that we currently have, if folks switch over from their current provider to a lower cost town option, they would be getting money back into their pocket to help offset some of that tax impact. So it's actually, it doesn't look as bad as it shows here. This is the debt service piece. Again, I wanted to back up that large towers being funded through debt service. This is what it would look like. And I did touch on that fact that this year we have the star that shows the interest only payments. And then we move into the second year of the bond, and it's just a matter of scheduling. We're not playing games with interest only stuff. They break up the interest payments into 2 times a year. One falls in this fiscal year, the other falls in the next. And so we do have a big spike the next year that we'll have to deal with and account for. One thing that's not shown here that we know is on the horizon, again, this is current and budgeted. We do have a fire truck that we're going to need to purchase. If you look at the teal on this chart, that's actually the current fire truck bond. It is larger than what we would see moving forward because that was a 7 or 8 year bond. When we bond the next time, we would be doing a longer term bond, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. I'd recommend 20, and that will result in a lower impact over that period of time. But we wanted to wait until after we were done paying off the existing fire truck before we moved on to securing new debt for a new truck. And I'm going to stop there, stop my screen sharing and ask if there are any questions on the expense side of things before we move on to the general budget highlights. And I think we've got about maybe 5-10 minutes left of me talking before we open it up for other people more. So.
Well, Eric, to give you a moment to rest your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you for this great.
I was trying to be efficient, so.
I may have missed this. Legal services. Could you indicate what's our budget this year and what we're budgeting next year?
Yes, so our budget is currently $25,000. We've spent probably 15,000 of that. A large portion of it defending against Robert Bitar and his actions involving the Safe Space Meeting House. I don't agree that those are legitimate, but we have to defend against them anyway. As a municipality, we have to respond to lawsuits. And past experience shows that we should expect to have a lawsuit regarding that matter. And we're prepared to deal with it. So we've increased our budget to $50,000 from 25.
The reason I was asking about that is that, we're on the verge of entering a $5 million contract. And that's going to span 20 years. And broadband is such a highly technical and specialized field of law that the town solicitor and the MMA legal services may not be able to adequately represent our concerns or tell us what our concerns should be, as a matter of fact. So I think that we should be putting something in there, and I don't know how much that should be. But to have a legal consultant that specializes in this technology.
That's a very good point, and we are seeing already accrual of some of those expenses as we try to navigate things like borrowing for a special municipal project, understanding insurance costs, all those things. So you're absolutely right, and I'll look at that and consider what we may want to add or how we may want to reallocate some of that. Thank you, Marty.
I'd just like to comment on that and then I'll recognize Ralph. Once we get through this process, if it's voter approved, of the design, construction and implementation, there really shouldn't need to be anything specialized about it because it will just be an asset that the town owns. Because we're not going to be operating it. There'll be a contract for a separate company to be operating it. So any of those legal issues wouldn't pertain to us about internet service and that type of thing. So I think once we can get through the construction phase, we'll probably be all set. If we were a municipal utility, I think that could involve more of the things that you're saying, but that's not the format that we're going to start with currently, so.
I know nothing about broadband, though, acknowledge that freely, but I do know about legal contracts. I've negotiated many big ones, and I've always relied on attorneys that are specialized in that particular field. Perhaps what could be done rather than hiring somebody immediately would be to talk to the town solicitor or MMA Legal Services and ask for their advice on it. Because these things can get pretty interesting. I mean, but one question that I've run into is who owns Axiom? Is there a venture capital company that can control them? Things like that can really turn friends into not friends. So I would encourage at least going that far.
Thank you. Ralph?
To the line item for legal services, where I expended right now to the amount of about 15K, you said.
It's closer to 10, probably, yeah.
Okay. I would assume that we're just going to encumber that and roll it into the next fiscal year so that we will have a cushion given unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. We had established a legal fund as a reserve, essentially, so that unexpended balances, as you say, are encumbered to the next fiscal year. So we have those resources available. But it seems like no matter how much we put in, we're pushed to spend it. And that's unfortunate, but we can't ignore past precedent. And I think we will have some money left at the end of this year, provided that nothing happens on the legal front. But we're just not sure. There's still so much up in the air.
Thank you.
Okay, Eric, if you want to bring up the
Yes.
conclusion.
All right. Okay, so the budget highlights the pandemic-related labor and material costs are the main driver for increased operating expenses. Community investments in broadband and recreation are primarily behind capital costs and debt service increases. Those two things are very much related. And I just say this budget is the pandemic budget. We are spending money on things that our community has prioritized during and as a result of the pandemic. And we're spending it in ways that result directly, in most cases, to things that have happened during the pandemic. So I think that we are responding appropriately to the things that are happening around us and the things that we want to do as a community to address our future. And so those things come together. And after 2 years of decreasing what we've asked of taxpayers, we're once again asking for an increase. And it is an important point that we did have 2 years of reductions, and now we're going to an increase. And in all honesty, in defense of the school, if you take what their 10 or 12% increase is this year, and back it up and say, well, wait a minute, look what they had in 2020 for a budget. If you add 3% a year over the 3-year period until you come to this budget year that we're looking at, you come to that 10%, that 12%. So they're actually not that different than anybody else in dropping things down and then coming back up. And the town is doing something similar. The school budget, like I said, it is 10 to 12%. It's available. They have a lot of information. It's good information. They had an excellent workshop with the select board last week, was it?
Yes.
It's a blur. The school budget is the bulk of what we pay in property taxes, and I want folks to just be aware of that and hopefully supportive because it's in many cases a very needed thing. They're still discussing their budget, and I hope people can be involved with that process. The county budget is unknown at this time, but it's usually around 5% of what you pay in taxes. And I do expect it to be flat this year. The county received a lot of money, millions of dollars to our hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I expect that they will be responsible and use that to help balance out some of their budgeting. We don't know that for sure, but that's the hope and anticipation. Moving on to some important dates. April 1st, 2022 is the deadline for homestead exemptions. With the current estimated mill rate of 14.91, that equals around $373. That number changes every year based on the mill rate. Mill rate is established, and the valuation for the exemption is $25,000. So the first $25,000 of property you have gets discounted, and that results at a 14.91 mill rate of $373. Just for background, April 15th is the date when nomination papers are due, along with warrants to the town clerk and any petitions that might be coming forward. May 13th, 2022, absentee ballots are available for the municipal ballots. And I want to be very clear about this. We make sure that we meet state law. May 13th is the deadline. The state of Maine typically drops us their ballots 2 or 3 days after their established statutory deadline. That's okay to the state, they do what they do. The school also doesn't have their vote until the 17th to finalize things. And so we wouldn't have their ballot for our local election or their second referendum until at least the day after, and if not a little bit later. So one thing that we ask voters is that even though absentee ballots are available for the municipal side of things that Friday, we ask folks to either please be patient and not request them until a week later, or to allow us to take their application, compile the ballots that we have to mail out, and send them out in one mailing to save time and resources. So June 2nd is the final public budget meeting and hearing. And I can say that we will have, as has been noted before, a lot more information regarding both the municipal broadband project and the project for the fairgrounds, community park, and conservation. And then June 14th is town meeting, and then we'll all know what's going to happen next. So that's all I have, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Eric. Very thorough presentation. We're very fortunate to have you as our town manager. You give us a lot of information in a concise way, and I think it's quite understandable to the general public.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has a question, comment, concern? Thank you to those people who have participated via Zoom tonight, as well as everyone who's been here in the room. And with that, I will adjourn our meeting at 8:24.
Oh, man. On time.
And look at that. That efficiency.
Wow.